Okay. In today's session, we discuss about session management in Java. Okay. What actually the session management? Why do we need this session management? How we do a coding under session management? What is the purpose of this? Who do this session management? Right? It is one of the important topic in the servlet programming. By definition, the session, which is session, belongs to servlet. It is a servlet session. It is a mechanism in Java used to track the session, I mean to store the session information. By who do this? The web container will do this, which means it is a mechanism used by the web container to store session information. But why we are storing this session information? Because of what purpose is to track the user data, which means that every time when you are sending a request to the servlet, right, it cannot keep track of this who user is, what user is requesting that, which means HTTP protocol and these web servers are stateless. It means that for web server, every request is a new request to process. They cannot identify that if the request is coming from the client that is already been sending previously or it is a new request. So that's why we call it as a stateless. It is HTTP protocol and the web servers. They doesn't know that they have already sent the request previously. So if we go with that type of request, it's a lot of requests are there. Again, it is very difficult to maintain the user request, right? The previous session. For example, you take that online shopping cart, any shopping cart applications, right? First, the moment you log in, right, it send the request to the servlet. And again, it will not ask you to send one more request, and right, or to log into for different actions. For example, choosing browsing the items and choosing the item and adding to cart, paying the bill, and etc., right, for further activities, which means there is no new request every time when you are performing operations after logging to that particular application. It's e-commerce application. When the first time when you log into the application, right, then server side, it has to maintain one unique identifier, which means say that this user is logged in and this user is still there in the current session. This user is performing actions on this session, and that session will be there until user log out from the session, which means that every time we don't need to send a separate request to the web server, to the container, right, to create a new instance, right? So to keep track of this data, we need to have a session. Means a session is a conversational state between the client and the server. It contains multiple requests and responses between the client and the server. Client and server request responses in the sense where if you log into the application, right, first time the session has to be generated, which means some ID. That's we will discuss later how it looks. That unique identifier should be generated. Again, multiple requests and responses here we are talking about, right? When you log into the application, then you may go to different options like searching for the required items. And once you got the results, right, based on that, you may choose the items, add to cart or remove to cart. After at the end of that, you may check out and select the payment option and proceed with the payment and confirmation payment and see the deliver, and you have to choose the delivery address, so on, so on. Which means then you are sending the request, means you are adding item to the cart. That is a request. Then the message will be say that item added successfully. What is that? That is a response to you. Like again, if you want to delete that item from the cart, then you go and click on the delete action or button, the link, whatever they provide in the website. Then you see that message again comes as a response, a item removed successfully from the cart. And once you check out, right, then checkout is happened. Then once you check out successfully, then you say checkout successfully. And if you select the payment and proceed, payment is successfully done. So all these are request responses between the client and the server. Since HTTP and the web server both are stateless, but the only way to maintain that some unique information is about session ID. Mean that is called as a unique identifier. We call it as a session, and basically it is a session ID that is passed between the client and the server in every request. So that is what all about the story of the session management. If you think that there are different ways we can achieve this. There are 4 techniques that you do that. One is cookies and hidden field and URL rewriting and HTTP session. So these cookies are nothing but a small piece of information. What is that? Just it's a small piece of information that is used to store our session. Means it is a little piece of data that is delivered by the web server. That's a response headers and kept by the browser. Each web client can be assigned to a unique session ID by the web server. And these cookies are used to keep session going and and maintaining that no a state of that current user. But if you go with the cookies, there is a problem with that. What is that problem? In browser, we have the option to turn off, mean disable the cookies at the client side. Because most of the clients, most of the users will not be allowed to maintain cookies at the browser because they are easily trackable. They can easily hack that. Hackers can easily hack that cookies. Using cookies, they can easily track your session ID. So that is the reason 99% mostly they will remove or turn off, disable the cookies from the, sorry. So that is not safe to use cookies. Next is hidden form field. See, this is not something that new. Hidden form field is the another way of tracking session. What is this hidden field? This it is coded. It is used in the HTML hidden field, like input text equal to something something. So it is something like. Let me show you how it looks. Oh, say that you know that HTML element, right? Input type equals to hidden. It means say that value, that name will be hidden. And you say some give that is a session. And value, what you want to give the value, it can be give anything, something like that. So this is called as a hidden using a hidden form field. So here we create a new unique hidden field in the HTML. When the user start navigating right from one screen to another screen, we can set this value unique to the user and keep track of the session. This cannot be hard coded in real time. This will be dynamically assigned by user to user. That is auto generated ID that we have to maintain it. Either you can generate it from backend side or in the client side. You can take any other approach also. Okay, we can set this value unique to the user and keep track of this session. This method cannot be used with the links because it needs the form to be submitted every time the request is made from the client, which sent back to the server with the form in the form of hidden field only, right? Wherever you have used this as a hidden name, hidden field, right? You have to submit that form to send this value to the server. right? The value generated here, right? It has to be submitted. It cannot be done from outside or anywhere. Once you submit this form, right? On submitting the form, the name session will be submitted to the web server and goes to the backend, and this will be maintained as a session for that current user. One question here, as we keep talking about session management, session that at backend side, who is responsible to check the incoming session ID from the browser and compare with the server? As we already discussed in the previous session, right? There is a servlet container, web container, which stores, which manages the entire servlets in that. So there in the web container is responsible to store that session ID at the server side. Once it generates the session ID at the server side, the same session ID it's sent to the browser, which is a client. So based on that session ID, the client will keep sending the request to the server. So with the request, when the server, sorry, when the client submit the request, it checks the incoming client ID, sorry, session ID, right? Then the server will first check the session ID coming belongs to this current user. If yes, then it will allow him to proceed. If it is something mismatched, then it will not let the user to proceed that session expire or whatever the code we have written, right? If the session ID is not valid, then we will say session expired or you are not authorized, something, right? So it checks that server will hold the copy of that. It's not a copy actually, that where it is generated, that session ID is there in the server side. It will send that copy to browser. Hey guy, you based on this session ID, J session ID, okay, I will keep track of your actions for further activities. So every time when user is interacting with that application, this JSON IDs keep sending from the client to the server. The server will keep identifying and checking that the session ID is already generated by me, or someone is sending something different. If it is something different, I cannot identify. I don't know who is this. So in that server side, the backend side, the web container will look at the incoming session ID and validate the user request, and it will allow him to keep track of maintaining his actions on this. Now, this is all about the session ID. There is one session management API is there. It is built on the top of that hidden forms, cookies, and URL rewritings. That so that this session management is one of the most important thing. Let's see now. Before we moving forward to the hands-on, let's see that okay, why we do need the session is clear, that how and different ways we have discussed that cookies, hidden forms, and URL rewriting, hence HTTP session. HTTP session is the most commonly used session interface in the Java applications. Here we have a lot of flexible methods are there. You can create a session if checks if the session is there. If it is not there, it create a new session. You can invalidate the session. Okay, you can maintain the session attributes. But in case of other options, right, let's take example of cookies. Cookies are more dangerous. And if we use cookies, and I told, right, if clients switch off, disable the cookies, then we cannot maintain any session IDs. Means we cannot track that user data. That is one thing. And we don't have option to turn off, to invalidate, to delete cookies from the browser. The only option is you set the max age time, means how much time the session ID is valid. Based on the time validity, then that cookie will be automatically clear off from the browser. But in case of HTTP session, this is a last option. We can create a new session. If we want to continue with the existing session, then we have a method. to check the session is new or old session. Depending on the requirement, then we can go ahead. If you want to create a new session every time, then you can see that no need to check the condition. There is a method called HTTP session get session, from where the session is getting using the request. Using the request object, we have to check request dot get session. Then, which means then it gets the session from the current incoming request. Is that session is new or old can be decided by the method in HTTP session. There is a method. It is a session is new or old. It will decide that. If it is a new, then you can go ahead. If it is a old, right, then you can go with our activities. And if you want to invalidate the session, then we have the method simply say session dot invalidate. So which means that it will invalidate your session, which means no further actions will be carried forward. Okay. Once you invalidate the session, then the browser says, the application said, the backend system said that there is no session exist or live for you to continue with further activities. So like that, we have a number of methods out there. One more thing that to always remember to recognize that as a developer, if we are maintaining a sessions, right, we should be very careful about these sessions. This make memory leaks. As people are keep creating a session, setting the sessions, that setting the session, that setting the object in the session, and they may forget to release that or to remove that object from the session, right? To maintain this session, right, it is not just, it's not holding the data logically, it is physically allocate some memory, some space, right? That space is still holding that until unless you remove that attributes from that session. If you just invalidate the session, it's fine, but at the same time, before you invalidate the sessions, be sure that what attributes, what fields are you have sent in the session, that you have to time you have to clear that once you are done with that activity. Otherwise, it leads a bigger problem. It's too many session management variables, right? Let's have memory issues. Then we will run out of memory issues. Don't put each and everything just in the session. We have to see that, we have to think that whether the session is required really. When do we use that session object, right? So according to that, you have to go with that. If you are navigating from one page to another place, and if you want to carry that forward data from one place to another place, something like when you submit a request in one UI, and if you want to maintain that object and across in another UIs, right, then you have to use that session for. For example, best thing is online shopping cart only. Once you start adding the items to the cart, what happens? A session is created and a cart object is created and put it in the session. That object is there across, and if you visit any number of screens and number of times, right? If you go to the cart anytime, it will show you that get session attribute you have, it is maintained internally. There is an attribute that gets added, and when you again add a new item, it checks for the current user session is there, yes, and checks if any items that are already added in the cart for this session ID, and it keeps track of that means the session attribute. Then it will replace that card with the new items and plus old items in that session attribute. Once user is done with that adding all items, then he will go proceed with the checkout. After checkout, the moment he is done payment successfully, the transaction is come done, right? So that time what he do first, here in the back end, this application is clearing the session attributes, means it is erasing the your carts clearly. Means what items you have added in the cart will be removed. Means that is a session attribute maintained in that scenario. It will remove the items from the cart, then it will go off further activities. Then once you are done with the payment, then that session J session ID is still there, but attributes are cleared out because you have done with the cart. The cart is no more filled, the cart is empty. Once you logged out of from the application, then this J session, this session ID will be invalidated. Then you are done with that current transactions completely. There is no more request pending for you. Then again, if you want to continue with that your activities shopping for, right, then again you have to log into the system. Why do you want to log into the system? Every time when the first step you log into the system is required, because it has to generate the session ID for you to keep track of your further activities. That is the reason the session ID is generated at the first time when we access the system. It is not only in e-commerce. If you think that any online applications anywhere, even a banking portal, even in right any other applications, right? So maintain this all the sessions. Without this session, you cannot have this keep track of our previous conversations. The session simply you can say it is the conversation of a user, means client to the server over a period of time, because sometimes they will not stay on the system long time, right? If user log into the system and they leave the system just like that, what happens is you may have already experienced so many times that the banking applications say that if you leave that system idle for 30 seconds or 1 minute, 2 minutes, they will set the time. Once you come back and try to perform any actions, then you say it is saying session expired, please re-log in, which means that some period of time, if we keep the system idle sometimes without working on that, the session time will automatically start, right? The countdown start. If the system is idle in this particular time, then automatically your session gets invalidated. Otherwise, if you are working on the system, the session will be alive for you. So that is the important thing that we have to handle in our applications also. How to maintain this is session max age is this, that there is a method to set max age of session. So you can specify the time in the milliseconds, how many seconds it can wait for the ideal time. After that ideal time, then it automatically invalidate your session. Okay, this is all about the details of session management. In simple terms, we can say this session management is nothing but it keeps track of our continuous requests and responses from the same client to the server, right? So that the server can easily identify our which client requests are being sent. One more scenario is that, so one and how this web container is keep track of all the session IDs, as some hundreds, thousands, million, okay, lakhs of requests are sending to the same application, that we no need to worry that. In the server side, the web container holds this list of values as a map. For every user, there is a session ID associated to that. Right? When you send this request, the JSON ID along with that internal identification, it will be sent to the web container. The web container will automatically checks that is it coming from this current client? Who is this client? What is that current state of information that is maintained till now? So it retrieve that user data automatically, so that it happens everything at the back end. You no need to worry of that, because the servlets create a separate date for every request. That is the reason we can see that every request is maintained uniquely. No matter how many requests, how many users are connecting to the system. This session IDs are maintaining uniquely unique to each user. So that is maintained by the web container. We don't need to worry about that, how it is that its job is to see that the incoming request is to the right user, to carry out his transactions, to carry out his conversations for further. Okay, now that's all about the session management. Now we will start in the next lecture to see that, okay, how this session works. Okay, we'll start some hands-on examples. Okay,